Debra Tate and keeping the Manson family members in prison, but she's involved in another story involving the potential release from state prison of a double murderer. Really nasty, nasty story. A guy that was up for release last year, but Jerry Brown turned it down. Will Newsom do the same? We'll talk to Debra Tate on the John and Ken Show. Debra Tate will come back on the John and Ken Show after 4:30. The sister of Sharon Tate, one of the Manson family murder victims from 50 years ago, has spent a good portion of her time fighting the release of any Manson family members. But she wants to talk to us about another case, a double murderer by the name of Greg Coates. He was up for parole a year ago, but Jerry Brown said no. This time it'll probably be up to Gavin Newsom because it's kind of automatic that he's going to be released. It's just a formality that the parole board says yes, but then Gavin Newsom could say no. You'll find out the details of this horrific double murder who actually murdered two people months apart. And then after the first murder, insinuated himself because he killed a family friend, helping them out with their mourning and grieving. Terrible, terrible psychopath. You'll hear Debra Tate after the news. We'll be talking to Debra Tate. She's been a guest on our show before. She is the sister of Sharon Tate, who's one of the Manson family victims in 1969, the Manson family murders. She's done a great job over the years trying to keep all of them behind bars, but she wants to make us aware of another murderer who might be released into the streets, a real psychopath, a double murderer. Find out more. We talk to Debra next.
KFI AM 640, live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app. John and Ken Show, John Cobell and Ken Champo.
Yes, everybody. Well, I tell you what, every now and then we like to get involved, help people keep murderers in prison. That's going to be the case again with our next guest, Debra Tate. Debra Tate, of course, is a sister of Sharon Tate. We all know about the Manson murders 50 years ago, and Debra Tate, of course, has devoted a lot of her time to keep all of the Manson family members that she can behind bars. But she does get involved in other murderer stories, and the one we're going to talk about involves an inmate by the name of Gregory Coates, who was actually found suitable for parole last year, but then Governor Jerry Brown reversed the grant of parole. He's up again with another parole hearing coming up in just a couple of days, and we think it's a good idea he stay in prison, and we'll talk to Debra now about all the details.
Debra, welcome to the show again. How are you?
Thank you. My pleasure to be on the show anytime. I'm fine. How are you?
We're good. Describe what Gregory Coates did. Most people probably aren't familiar with his case.
As a 19-year-old, he broke into the home of his high school friends, beat the friend's mother's in the head with a barbell, knocked her out, raped her, then stole one of the family guns, shot her in the head 2 times, and then attempted to set her on fire. Unfortunately, he would have been successful at burning down the whole house, but the 11-year-old daughter came home early from school. The nurse sent her home. That was fine back in 1975. Nurses could do that. And so the body was discovered by the 11-year-old daughter, forever being traumatized. Now, this man, being a family friend, hung out with the family, went to the funeral, said, "Oh, I hope you catch this person," was in and around the family as they went through their mourning process, which makes it a little extra heinous. 4 months later, went and did the same thing to his stepmother and burnt the house down with the stepmother's body. Nobody found her in time, but she also was raped, beaten to death, shot, and then the house burnt down around the body. The father, a short time after that, his father, hung himself from the mast of his boat, feeling that he had, his offspring was a sociopath. This man is, in my opinion, the trifecta of exactly what we do not need in our society. We know that sex offenders do not rehabilitate, nor do arsonists and he murdered twice that he was convicted for. So this is somebody we don't need out amongst us.
Apparently, was he a suspect in the months between the murders at all? I mean, as you said, he hung out with the family, helped mourn with them, and this was the murder of Gene Stevens.
No, he was not.
No.
He was not a suspect at all until the murder of his stepmother, and there was actually evidence left behind that led to that, and then Riverside, the county that he was that the friends lived in at the time, picked up the second case, and it was all put together that it was the same guy, and he has confessed since to the rape part. I have spoken personally with his ex-wife, who was repeatedly raped and domestic violence. She was brutalized while they were married for 2 years. The guy is chronic. He's serial, and that is why I get involved. These kind of people we don't need out amongst us.
Why do the idiots on the parole board want to release him? What's the argument for letting him go?
There is no argument anymore because it was made into a law. The Elderly Inmate Act was made into a law 2 years ago by then Governor Jerry Brown. And what that law basically states, this is the Crib Notes version, is that any inmate, whether or not they are suitable for the terms of parole, must be given a date simply because they are over the age of 60. So it all comes down to dollars and cents. We all become more medical, prone to medical issues after the age of 60. The state does not want to be financially responsible anymore, so let's just open up the gates of hell and put them out in the general population and see what happens.
Yeah, he was, 17 and 18 at the time he committed these murders, so that would put him, because this is 1975, in his early 60s.
What, are there any reports on his mental state now that he's in his early 60s?
There are many reports during a inmate's, tenure in prison, and it goes back and forth from being kind to being sociopathic. So it just depends on the doctor at the time.
Well, you don't fix
psychological issue is being addressed.
You don't fix sociopathic behavior. That often has to do with the structure of your brain, and that cannot be altered in any way.
Exactly. And this guy qualifies as a predatory killer. This is something that does not fix. He enjoys it. He's sexually turned on by it. I call it sexually charged by the act of murder, and then to cover his tracks, implements fire, which means he's a firebug. That bug doesn't happen in all serial killers. They don't all choose that. He also is sexually charged by fire.
He also alleged that his stepmother that he killed, Betty Coates, was molesting him when he was between the ages of 12 and 15. He also put in there, too?
Yes, he has said that, and then he has recanted on that during various parole hearings over the many years. Now, I personally have spoken with his classmates. People that knew him knew both victims, his stepmother as well as the Stevens mother, and none of these women, that never in a million years did anybody ever suspect such a thing as being valid.
Now, what would you like our listeners to do in this case?
I would like the listeners to all go and sign the petition. This is how we influence Governor Newsom we tell him our feelings, which is we don't want people like this in our society. So they go to change.org is the carrying site. Let me see.
The actual place to find a petition for this particular...
And his name is Greg.
Change.org, and then it's Keep Brutal Killer Greg Coates, Coates, in prison, and the petition will come up. You'll get a brief overview of what he's done, and you can either agree to sign, or if you don't agree, you can put that there too. This is fair. It's
Yeah.
a fair petition site.
Yeah, there's already
So we-
5,000, almost 5. Well, the page we have is 5,000 signatures and growing. So what we'll do, Deborah, we'll put a link up on our webpage for people to find this. And that's pretty much the only chance, though. This will come before Newsom. I guess we're pretty confident that it'll be up to Newsom.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It will come in front of him roughly in about 4.5 months. Because the law now states that anybody just for being 60 years old is now capable of being paroled.
It's all part of
They
the
have an
policy of
obligation
emptying
to
the
do it.
prisons. Why they thought of everything.
All right. Greg Coates,
Exactly.
Coates. Go to
Change.org.
All right, Deborah, thanks for coming on with us again.
Thank you so much.
All right, Debra Tate, who fights pretty hard to keep people in prison. Not just Manson family members. She's, of course, Sharon Tate's sister, but also murderers like this Greg Coates.